Greetings, viewers, and welcome to our future stream today. I'm Stuart Riddle, your host, and quick intro, and then we'll get into it. I run a software company called Connect Digital. We build digital products that help people do more with less, and as part of that, we do a lot of work with AI and automation. We're a curious bunch, and we love talking to other innovators who do similar things to us or very different things to us, depending on their skill set. And we love to share their experiences, talk about the learnings, the scars that often come from being in this territory. And we also love talking about the wild west of AI and the challenges that come with using that sort of cutting edge technology and what that means. So we launched Future Co and this stream to not just to meet interesting people like our guest today, Ben, but also to share AI knowledge and learning and help educate leaders who want to navigate the future of work with a measure of confidence and excitement. And we just don't like vanilla AI, that kind of those expected kind of obviously AI outputs that you probably come to recognize. And we think it's essential to combine human creativity with the precision of AI because we believe that's using AI to our advantage. So joining us today is Ben Richardson from Equinox Ventures. Welcome, Ben. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stuart. Appreciate it.
So you're the CEO of Equinox Ventures. I know that you have got a very interesting background that we want to dig into today, and I think your sort of wide-ranging expertise from medtech to fintech and who knows what else could give us some really interesting insights today as we think about innovation and AI and product and a few other things that we can throw in the mix. So, yeah, welcome. Great to have you here. So, before we kind of dive into the future, just want to take a step back and look at the past because I really love an interesting career journey, and I'm guessing that that's what yours is. I love how people kind of twist and weave their way through their careers and sidesteps and reinvention and ups and downs and everything that comes, particularly from entrepreneurial mindset. So I'm really interested to hear something about your kind of what looks like an unconventional pathway. It may not be, but can you take us on a quick journey through sort of the world of aerospace engineering through to where you are today with Equinox?
Yeah, it's a bit of a kind of stumbled my way through it. I guess my first venture was when I was 13, 14. I started torrenting website templates and then hosting them for local businesses so I could raise some small money for buying Xbox games. And I think that's where I first started touching the internet a bit. And then I chose aerospace engineering because I like the idea of being a rocket scientist, but my goodness, does that sector move slowly. And midway through that, I started getting involved with an agency as their first employee in sales, and then started doing more technical components for them, and got really back into coding and taught myself Ruby on Rails from the ground up, and started messing around with things. And and then I think Startup Weekend was really the catalyst for me jumping straight back into full tech. I went to a Startup Weekend, fell in love with the idea of starting a business over a weekend. And then from then on, I decided to actually create an Excel spreadsheet to work out how much time I needed to go into uni in order to get a pass instead of a distinction or high distinction. and then just focused as much time outside of that as trying to create as many ventures as I could. I tallied it up the other day. It was like about 36, 37 ventures I've attempted. Most of them have failed. About 3 or 4 of them have done well. But yeah, I think after that Startup Weekend, I just fell in love with the idea of like take a product and get it live to customers in 72 hours. So just started doing that with myself and my friends. And then along that way, I kind of got poached by a Big Four accounting firm to build and run their ventures, their SaaS ventures team. And the idea was to basically take parts of the business that were that were like they were lost leaders effectively, and try and productize them so that I could actually turn them profitable using software. And yeah, did that for a couple, both in the fintech space, and then had a bit of a stint with a national mental health platform. We raised $33 million from Greg Hunt to build it. And then after that, I was pretty much ready to do my own thing, and that kind of took us to Equinox Ventures. Yeah.
Very cool. So, in terms of kind of hit and miss ratios, would you say three out of what? Out of 30? What was the number?
Yeah, so I've sold one, and I've had kind of two that were doing well, and then now Equinox Ventures, which is now one, but it actually has kind of five under it. So yeah, prior to Equinox Ventures, it was pretty close to maybe somewhere between a 5 and 10% hit rate.
Okay.
Not billion-dollar businesses, that for sure, but like making money, making money and could build a lifestyle off it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, good. And kind of looking back over that journey and where you've been from and got to, like, any sort of major things you'd change, or you just kind of eyes wide open the whole way through and enjoyed the journey and happy with where it's at?
Oh, I wish, like, I in aerospace engineering, I did 13 modules of maths, and I was quite good at maths, but I kind of just like ignored it and then just went straight into coding. And I wish I'd actually done coding before. Like, I kept doing more coding before I did uni, because then I feel like I would have been able to mesh those two a little bit sooner than I have. Yeah, that's probably my only regret is I could have done a lot more deep tech stuff earlier in my career if I actually kind of brought those two together proactively, but got there in the end, but 10 years later.
Yeah, took the long way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I call it the scenic route. Kind of like a bit more interesting, but you kind of get to the same space later. So
yeah, that's it.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing. Like, what does this might be? I don't know if this is too personal. It's like, what does success look like? Is that to you? Like, is that everyone's got a really different definition of success, and I find it really interesting just to kind of go, like, how do you think, and like, what does that mean to you?
I want to, like, I personally, I want to solve the money problem. I don't want to have to be able to make a decision and worry that I'm compromising on some sort of like economic outcome. Because, like, I mean, particularly in business, there's so many things I want to do, but I cannot do. And usually that falls in the category of more kind of altruistic, or more kind of altruistic kind of things that would take kind of 10 years before you can possibly kind of commercialize it, like more longer term altruistic projects. And not having solved the money problem means I can't kind of embark on those and really make a dent in certain areas that I want to. So that's my main driver, is just want to solve the money problem personally, professionally, and then I can really focus on what I really want to focus on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Frees you up to make decisions that you wouldn't be able to make otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'd love to embark on a kind of like an 8-year project to make a significant difference in millions of people's lives, but it's just not practical right now, and with the war chest that I've got at the minute.
Yeah. I like this idea of having a project that's bigger than your lifetime. For everyone, that can be in a really different space. But having that kind of project that you can at least initiate and hopefully spearhead and give to the next generations, pretty interesting. And it kind of gives you a sense of purpose and direction in what you're doing. So it's one to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. My summary of Equinox Ventures, and please correct me and correct our, help our audience understand it. But my summary is, it's a product venture studio that essentially funds its own products, and by products we mean web applications, consumer apps, or B2B apps that solve problems that you are probably charging a monthly subscription for, and you want to grow those and sell those and kind of get to that success sort of state that you just talked about. Is that a fair summary of what it's about?
Yeah, it's pretty close. So I guess to give you a sense of why I kind of created it the way I did, after I sold my last venture, which was in the event management space, a SaaS product, um, I there was like three things that I wanted to do. And I was like, I'm sick of compromising and picking one and then moving on to the next.
Yeah.
and Yeah, and so I wanted to create a vehicle, and myself and my co-founder were kind of both in the same category. We want to create a vehicle where it could actually like solve all these different problems in completely different sectors and different industries, different tiers of business model. Um, and when we actually started looking at like, well, practically, like, why hasn't this really been done in the way we want to do it? We couldn't really come to a good reason why not, because all of the benefits around the thesis. One of the core thesis is that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. So, for a while, no one of our companies could justify having a head of AI. But if a head of AI worked across multiple companies that was under the studio, and the studio owns 100% of all of the companies under it, then we can kind of shift resources and expertise across the organization. So the kind of thesis was that we can skill up with a lot of very senior experienced people, and have a number of smaller companies, none of which could independently justify a team that size, but together could. And that's led to some really interesting outcomes that we couldn't even predict. We've just scratched the surface so far. So yeah, and I guess the other main benefit as well is being a developer myself. I really wanted to, like, one of the reasons why I get so bored, I think, is very common in a lot of developers, where like you want to constantly solve new challenges and not kind of rehash the same old stuff. And being able to create an environment where developers wouldn't have to leave a company in order to work on a different company is a really, really, really interesting take. So currently, we're 4 years in. We've had 100% retention of everyone that's passed probation for all of our staff.
Awesome.
And we're 25 and growing. And so, yeah, it's just trying to create the perfect environment where people can stay, the intellectual property stays, and we can just like do a lot of different things, but all under kind of one banner. That's what Equinox is all about.
Thanks. I've been seeing a bit of news around LabFlow, and I presume that's the product getting the most traction. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's really rocketing at the minute. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. We can dive into that if you're happy to share. But I just want to get a sense of how the team is using AI to really kind of accelerate things, or push the boundaries. Like, you're covering kind of everything from medtech to fintech, which in my head is the two industries I'd prefer to stay out of, but because they're so highly regulated, and it's just it's probably hard, which is why you've chosen them, perhaps. But love to know how kind of AI fits into that piece, and if you can take us through some specific examples of how you've used AI to sort of power those projects, that'd be super interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've kind of got three core streams of AI. We're using convolutional neural networks for image processing, and then we're using two different streams of LLMs for sort of very specific tasks and very general tasks. I guess one broad thing is, even though AI is kind of becoming an increasingly important part of our business, I think unlike a lot of news around kind of how dedicated AI startups are being started, we very specifically try and solve every problem without using AI as a starting point, and only use it where it's appropriate. But so far we've got kind of it kind of sits across two companies, and I guess the first one is Ocular. It's a tool we've been working on for about 4 years now, and it's effectively a mobile phone application that you can hold up to someone's face, and the torch turns on and off. And then from that, we extract biomarkers around how your pupil moves, like dilates and constricts. And then from that, we can actually infer how your autonomic nervous system is functioning. and so this is like one of the key biomarkers for detecting concussion, for example. So we use AI heavily in that. We have a machine learning model on the device, so no cloud required, running 80 times a second at minimum, to run to extract all the biomarkers that we need and package it all up. That's been an absolute mammoth project. We've invested a lot of capital in R&D for that. And that's just really starting to come out of its shell now, which is quite exciting. I think one of the things that excites me most about that. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Ben. Is a typical use case for that, say, the sporting field, where you can really quickly assess someone, or what's a good use case for it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good use cases. So sports is a good one. Understanding what the kind of pattern of your autonomic nervous system is through how your pupil responds to a light, and then seeing you, like after a head knock, you will expect that to change significantly, and to be able to kind of determine very quickly, am I within my normal range, or am I outside of it, and I should probably kind of seek further help.
Yeah.
That's a huge use case, and there's a lot of other use cases as well, for triaging for in emergency response rooms for people that might have a suspected some sort of like an injury on the stem of the brain, and there's a lot of other use cases for neuro-ophthalmology as well, to kind of track kind of recovery and specific of specific conditions. So the use cases are very broad. We're kind of just now at the point where we're starting to really unpack that and test those in various markets, with leaders in each of those sectors.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, cool. Sorry for interrupting. You were on a train of thought that I probably stopped the flow of.
No, that's all right. So I guess the thing that makes this like a particularly powerful use of AI, I think this is a particularly great example of AI being used well. It's not like just a kind of generative text app. It's being able to put this in the hands of anyone, at very, very low cost, in developing nations, where they can immediately kind of scan their face and see how things are going. I think it's tools like this and applications of AI like this that are really going to like balance the equity of healthcare and other kind of mission critical services for society. I'm quite excited for where this one's going to go.
And the kind of local processing elements interesting. Is that due to sort of a couple of things? Like springs into my head is one, the low sort of network capabilities or maybe remote areas that you might need to use this in, and is the second one privacy? Have you focused it in that area for those reasons, or is there other sort of rationale behind local processing?
Yeah, so I think local processing, I mean, the key advantage is definitely latency. So it's like you can do a 17-second scan and immediately get the results, not wait for cloud processing. The other side of it is cost.
Right.
Like we don't running cloud infrastructure, particularly in developing nations, is a very inhibitive. You can't create a profitable business model from that. So, just like physical medical devices, which are very expensive, usually sold from the US or like developed nations, they're just not accessible economically in developing nations. So, I think that kind of really unlocks the ability for the tool to have a lot of impact at scale. So that was probably the other large driving factor. So it took us about 18 months to recompress the entire machine learning algorithm and have it work on any device in the last kind of 5-6 years. We got there, but man, it was a mission. That was for sure.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well done. That's very cool. In the AI projects that we've done, it's like I kind of liken them to the arc reactor in Iron Man's suit. You have this kind of critical component that AI is sort of powering, and it's the part of the suit that's the most expensive. But the suit itself as a whole is the thing that gets the job done, right? It's like you can't really have the AI component on its own. You've got to have the user experience and the sort of functional components of what is really just traditional software, right, to support it and make it support the use cases that it's intended for. So, while AI projects might seem like they're sort of large and complex, like in our experience anyway, it's been a lot of software development in the traditional sense that just sort of wraps that into a great experience. Is that sort of your take on it, or you've got a different angle?
No, I think that's it, and that's exactly why at Equinox we start from the user, from the customer first, and then where there's a problem appropriate, we then solve that with AI. It's just you see a lot of AI startups kind of spin up, crash, and burn. And I think it's because they've wanted to create an AI solution and wrap the experience around it. And that's just not a good way to build a business. so yeah, I think exactly the same way. It's like, understand exactly what the problems you're solving is, put the customer first, design what that actually looks like, and then plug AI in where appropriate to really bring it to life.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So some of the industries that you're in, like healthcare and finance, like are not only heavily regulated, but they're notoriously slow adopters. It's like, I'm sure that can sometimes feel like you're sort of wading through the swamp trying to get somewhere when your whole ethos is about shipping product, and if you love being on the tools and coding, you love getting a business spun up in 72 hours. Like, that can be pretty frustrating, I'd imagine. How do you tackle that? Just, is it long term thinking? Is it kind of slowing down, and that's where your team sort of helps, or like what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think particularly in LabFlow, we're very enterprise oriented, and so that means few customers, high revenue. And the good thing about that is we like to take our time with the customers that we onboard to make sure that they are ready, that they're ready to move fast. And so we, as an organization, we don't compromise how we operate around the customers. We make it very clear how we operate, why we operate, and the governance we have in place to protect them, even though it's a very radically different way to what they're used to. And once we're kind of on board with that, then things go very, very smoothly. That extends the sales pipeline out quite significantly, to the frustration of our sales team. but it means that once they're in with one of these customers and their expectations are managed and they're set up to operate, to expect the way we operate, then it flows very, very well. So, for example, during COVID, LabFlow launched a tool that did the QR codes at the pop-up tents. It did all the courier tracking. It integrated with the analyzers, printed out the S-curves, did the interpretation, sent out like dashboards to Ministry of Health, everything end to end. So we did about up to 50% of the PCRs in New South Wales, and we were shipping new updates of that sometimes twice a day, live production, blue-green deployments. And even though that was COVID and everything was moving quickly, our approach just perfectly fit into that. And ever since then, we've been able to kind of retain that experience with that customer, and they want to still move as quickly as we do. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the keys for our successes is finding the customers that really, really resonate with how we go. And that's how we create these really great products and get to innovate really rapidly with these close customers. And the customers that can't kind of handle that, particularly in the public sector, we kind of mature the products and kind of sell them very traditionally to them after the fact. But yeah, that's how we keep the team very, very active and energized.
Yeah, because it's very easy to slow down. It's kind of easy to rest on your laurels and kind of hit go slow mode, and then not be driven to kind of find the right client that suits your way of working, and make sure they're meshed with that. So good to hear.
It's an interesting dichotomy, actually. I mean, like, everyone wants to, Mark Zuckerberg, move fast and break things, but that is not possible in health tech. You cannot break things, but you can move fast. You just have to be very, very careful about how you kind of structure that and set that up.
Yeah. Have the right processes, policies, procedures, that kind of stuff, sort of sitting behind the team, and make sure they're followed, I guess. So. Yeah, interesting. It's and I think in healthcare, it's like clinical trials, right? That's kind of what springs into my head when you think about medtech. It's like clinical trials need to be done to sort of prove and give it the tick of approval from whichever authority has oversight in that particular area. So, has that been a challenge? Is that sort of medical oversight or clinical trials, or is that part of? Do you have a development customer approach? How does that work?
Yeah, it just basically comes down to risk governance. I think we like with every time the team want to kind of try a new process or try a new tool, rather than putting it through a kind of laborious kind of process where it kind of goes through several checks and balances, which you use to set up because you've got all these different policies. We instead kind of have a lean approach to policies. So both Brendan and myself, we've got our Institute of Company Directors kind of certifications, so we understand risk very well. And so instead, we redesigned our risk framework from the ground up, where we can very rapidly assess new approaches, new tools, new processes that need to change, and then we plug it in relative to a risk threshold and then evolve it from there. But it does require a complete shift in mindset to embracing risk and then redesigning it in a way that doesn't compromise the outcome. Whereas I think a lot of organizations kind of struggle to put risk at the front and then not make it feel like risk is at the front. And so that's the real delicate dance, is making it like our team have no idea how many kind of checks and balances happen behind the scenes for all these things. And that's the way it kind of needs to feel. But they definitely happen. But it does require a complete redesign from the ground up, exactly how you guys need to work and as a team and how you want to approach it.
And then you layer up AI on top of that. So, there's some upcoming sort of governance and framework and standards that are going to need to be sort of plugged into that, and we'll probably bring an extra layer of governance and oversight that's needed in that space.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, particularly. So, for example, with Ocular, we're taking a lot of images and then we're processing each of those images. And so we're getting the video files and then we're kind of breaking them up into frames and then processing them. But when we reuse that information for building a second model or evolving the model over time to make it better and better and better, like there's some pretty good frameworks in Europe, as usually there are, where you need to know exactly what images were used for what model, how they were used, what the confidence threshold was when they were put in, and there's a lot of kind of evolution around that. I think this is one of the things that Australia kind of struggles with is we're very bad at privacy compared to GDPR and CCA and all these other kind of privacy frameworks that are evolving. We're very very slow. And so it's kind of, I guess, on us as organizations to actually like look at what is the best practice and kind of get as close to that as possible before we have to meet regulations. Yep. Ultimately, I don't trust the regulations that will come in the first draft will be anywhere near they should be, especially at the rate they're evolving overseas. So that's probably one of the hardest things. Again, that comes back to the risk side of things, right? It's like, how risky are we willing to be with that, and where do we want to actually kind of pull from to derive that framework? But once you understand that, you can like fully productize that. Like a lot of this stuff can be codified, and all these kind of checks and balances. I'd say 80 to 90% of particularly the technical world of checks and balances can be codified and automated.
We've got a product, one of our products called Use Cloak, which is essentially an AI sort of redaction and unredaction service that strips out PII from any AI calls before it goes off to AI and then unredacts it when it comes back. And we've used that in a couple of different services. But we're part of an AI sprint, which is a CSIRO/Google sort of accelerator, and we're just running through that at the moment. And it's been actually quite reassuring to see some of the frameworks and standards discussions in that program, and everyone's trying to get their head around it. But it's very clear that since 2018, when some guidelines sort of came out, and how it in 6 years hasn't really moved that far, but at least we're starting to kind of bring it together and giving particularly small business some sort of at least some guidelines and frameworks to operate in. And some of the content that I saw this week was quite good in terms of clarity and the different areas to look at. So kind of hopeful, and I think we'll start seeing some more direction from at a government level, this year. How that sort of evolves with the new Privacy Act that's coming out and so on, I think that's all kind of part of the journey. So, but good to see it moving in the right direction, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the end of the day, it sparks conversation, and then it's kind of up to everyone to start responding to that or partake in it or take it on in some degree, shape, or form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
What you don't want to do is like not do anything and wait for the legislation to come out and then suddenly got to do a massive amount of work to catch up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But to your point about codifying it, getting some of that thinking in place in your team is going to be pretty important, I think, for those teams that are building on AI or building in those sectors that you're in anyway.
Yeah.
You've kind of given us a pretty good insight into how you've structured your team and how sort of fast they move. In terms of sort of cultivating AI and knowledge and expertise, you mentioned a head of AI, and it's obviously in the front of your mind in terms of bringing it into products where relevant and where it's going to add value. But like you said, have you got any kind of top tips for teams who are wanting to introduce that thinking into their teams around AI in particular?
Yeah, this is AI is just moving at an unbelievable pace at the minute. Like I'm reading Hacker News 2 or 3 times a day, and like there is just major announcements and, and new models and new approaches and new research being announced. Like daily. Um, and I think one of the things to probably stay to be as a technical leader, one of the things would be to definitely read Hacker News every day. and so then when you start seeing things pop up and how the conversations are unfolding, you get a sense of how valuable that particular piece of technology may or may not be. In terms of like implementing, like I guess coming up with means to integrate it into your team's way of thinking and then the solutioning workflows, I guess. We are starting to do internal education about where AI is currently at, and kind of updates from our head of AI across the company around the kind of evolution of AI to provide general insight. But I think one of the key reasons why we appointed a head of AI is specifically so that we can have a person to go to. So when someone says, "Hey, could AI do this?" we now know we've got someone who can say, "Okay, yes, here's how I can do it, and here's the 3 A's, and here's the cost impact, and here's what it may or may not be relevant for." But the best thing about having a head of AI, particularly the type that we've got, is a lot of the times you'll say, no, computational analysis will provide you an equivalent outcome. It'll be faster and less risky. And you need to kind of really balance that. So I think that's one of the probably things that we do best in our organization is ask the question, encourage curiosity, but be very open to saying no and not just saying yes for the fun of it.
Yep. Nice. That must be very useful having a senior person with those kind of skills. I imagine like saying no is it's a pretty handy quality to have when you're talking about developers keen to get involved in the next shiny thing, right? It's good.
Yeah.
Kind of pulling out your crystal ball, if that's possible. Like you say, AI is moving at this kind of crazy pace, but if you did have a crystal ball and based on kind of the rate of acceleration in the last couple of years, you've been involved in this for sort of six or so years now. Where do you see it heading in the next couple of years? Do you care? Do you kind of think about it just in the realms of what you're using it for in your products, or do you have a sort of broader sense or opinion on where it's going?
Yeah, like this is one of so in for example in LabFlow, we've built a tool for pathologists to say what they're seeing down a microscope or on a digital slide, and then we immediately we extract that data out in real time, filter it for the pathology specific diagnoses, and then put it in a structured format. The synoptic reports they use are very complicated. There's lots of nesting, lots of conditional components, and it's quite a complicated work. So it's a lot more dictation. And I think one of the things that we've learned through that project is that if you don't anticipate what's coming around the corner, you're constantly going to be hamstrung trying to fix what is available now versus what's about to happen. We're constantly balancing, well, how much do we invest in RAG and fine tuning versus wait for GPT-5 or the next major medical model available on Hugging Face? And that's probably one of the hardest balances to make. I think what we're seeing now is a lot of like the meme, like, OpenAI killed my startup, but they also created it.
Yeah.
And I think like it's maybe 90% of the AI startups out there at the minute. And I think one of the biggest problems there is they're looking at the technology available, they're building around that, and they're not anticipating what's happening around the corner. And so from that regard, it's absolutely crucial to kind of and humans aren't good at this. Like exponential growth and exponential anything doesn't really come naturally to us. It's very unusual in human history, and so I think kind of it requires a lot of proactive effort to really get a sense of where the trajectory is at in the certain fields of AI that you're applying, to make sure that you're not just reinventing the wheel. It's about to be researched and released like 2-3 months away. Yeah. So that's big. One of the biggest challenges I think a lot of organizations face. But from that perspective, it's very, very critical. The head of AI and myself can have kind of the conversation, like technical conversations around not only what's available now, but what might come in the future as well. And have that regularly and often to make sure that we're not over investing in kind of computational solutions around the edges of inferior AI as it is today.
Yeah, okay. That's some good insights there. It's kind of predict it as best you can, but you have to make decisions. You have to make decisions about which way you're going to go. And I think from a business perspective, like if you're thinking about AI projects for a business, then leadership has to be across that and be aware of that. Which is less relevant for product studios like yourselves, but if you've got teams building projects, then sometimes you have to be prepared to back out of those decisions. And if there's a better way, that's just kind of come out of nowhere, seemingly. So, yeah, it's an interesting experience and mindset, I think, to be able to
exactly.
Yeah.
I think so. Something that we're constantly obsessed with is, particularly in the realm of like dictation, effectively, but very intelligent dictation, is that latency of like how quickly can it go to the model in the cloud, come back and start kind of providing an end user experience where it's like they're like, is it stalled? Like they're not waiting for something. And it's interesting, like over the last 6 months, particularly with that tool, we've absolutely pushed the limits of how far we could go with GPT-3 and then 3.5 and 4 and now 4 Turbo. And every single time we had to be very, very careful to time box our effort and set an investment criteria internally around how much actual investment Brendan and I are willing to make in solving that problem in this round of that particular GPT versus waiting for the next one and offsetting revenue till we kind of have that solved downstream. It's very hard. It's difficult to solve, but it's definitely something to be conscious of.
Yeah. Do you think that'll be an ongoing battle, an ongoing sort of struggle where you're trying to time box things, but there's just a far better way to achieve an outcome? It's kind of there's always going to be this tension there, I think.
I don't necessarily think so, because I think the number, like in terms of solving very, very complex problems as opposed to straight kind of generative AI, kind of text or video or phone photos, the the amount of hard problems are not necessarily going to scale, but the amount of research and money being thrown into research that results in open source solutions is scaling at an incredible rate. And so the kind of the complexity of the problems might be increasing a little bit, but the exponential rate in which everything's kind of coming up is it's converging over time. I imagine with GPT-5, based on kind of what I'm seeing, you'll be able to do a lot of what we've done in our tool automatically, but we weren't willing to wait another kind of 6 to 9 months before we take it to market. But it does mean that in 6 to 9 months, then it'll be a lot easier, because the majority of the actual complexity will be productized in the GPT to create a competing business to what we just created with that particular product. And so from that perspective, I think, it's a really interesting trade-off. It's like the ability to gain market share and establish a trench with an AI-backed product is a declining race at this stage. So it's going to come down to sales and relationships and commercials more than actually being capable of solving the problem with deep expertise.
Yeah. Or it also supports your kind of few customers, but larger customers kind of approach, I think. It's hard for big businesses to change direction once they've committed to something, and doesn't mean you get complacent. It just means that it's easier to be embedded in there for longer. Keep doing a good job, keep your customers happy, and it's got a basic levels of customer satisfaction, right? It applies at either end of the scale. But far harder for a $10 AI product, $10 a month AI product to kind of keep that moat around its services. Yeah, good. Do you personally use AI sort of day to day to kind of get more done, or is it a sort of does it help you streamline your day, or you try and stay off it when you don't need to be?
So occasionally I'll use ChatGPT to throw in a very complicated spec and give me a summary. I've tried to use it to write specifications, but it hasn't quite got there. So I'm actually training my own GPT off all of the specifications and internal writings that I do. I'll see where that gets to the end of the year. But yeah, the opportunity for miscommunication from something generated by GPT is pretty high. So I can really only use it for direct personal tasks, and I don't usually have personal tasks. I'm usually writing things to give direction or convey a vision to members of the team. So from that regard, I don't use it much. That said, Otter.ai, which is like the transcription tool that joins your meetings, that has been unreal, because we sign up to the team plan, everyone jumps in it, and then all the meetings happen, even when I'm not there. All the data's consolidated at the company level, and I can ask it questions. So I can say, how did the meeting with this particular customer go? And then it responds it. And so it's from that perspective, that has been particularly powerful for our organization.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. If your time was freed up, like if I know what it's like being in running a team and being in a business like yours, and it's pretty hard sometimes to get this sort of work-life balance going. But if you could save 5 or 6 hours a week with AI, how would you spend it? How would you go and kind of have some downtime, or would you just get more work done?
To be honest, if I would probably, I really miss coding. I really miss it. I would probably get back on the tools and create internal tools. It's exactly what I do. Yeah, I really miss coding. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Okay. That's kind of cool. It just means that if you do have a small problem that you need to solve, you can probably hack something together to do it. So
yeah. We do it every now and then. One of the tools that we've created, it's internal use only at this stage. We call it Profitable. Is so Equinox we're never going to sell, so we don't do ESOP in it, because the concept is you sell the subsidiaries and that goes up, and then we distribute the kind of cut across the team. But you obviously got to track that, and there's a lot of metrics in place, kind of complex and similarly complex to an ESOP plan. And so we've kind of designed our own concept of like a unit, and you can like earn units that get when a company sells goes up to Equinox, and then we distribute across all the units. The concept there being, I want our employees to stay beyond an exit as well. So we want to repeat that 2, 3, 4 times over with the same group. And so yeah, that as an internal tool, we started building that, and I built that from the ground up. That was really fun. And now our lawyers told us that actually he's got other customers that want to use it. So now we're going to productize it. Now it's turned into a big product, and we don't know.
We'll see it on your website soon.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be up there soon.
That's great. Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of, that's where I think the kind of fun of product development comes into it. It's like, sort of gets your spark back, right? Where you build something and it solves your own problem. You go and show someone and they love it and pick it up, and before you know it, you've got some traction. So it's kind of nice.
The last time I did that, actually, I got really, really frustrated with the hotels that require a physical card for you to authorize. I'm like, surely it should just be a QR code, and then you just authorize the Apple Pay and you're done. And so I on a business trip over one weekend where I had nothing to do, I just built that out and got it tested. And then showed it to the LabFlow team, and then the LabFlow team are like, oh, this solves like a huge problem with out-of-pocket payments that fall outside of Medicare. And then 3 weeks later, that's now rebranded. It's become LabPay, and now it's got customers, and it's taking a life of its own. So yeah, I just want to do more of that. That's for the really fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, when you've sold a few of these companies, I'm sure you'll have the opportunity. So keep at it. I mean, I think that's just a great way to kind of have fun and hopefully make some money in the process. So that's good. Ben, I really appreciate your time. It's been great chatting and getting a kind of insight into the life of Ben and what you do at Equinox. So appreciate your time and your insights and sharing some of that knowledge and I guess wisdom that's come from the years of doing what you're doing. So love it. And maybe we can set up a time 2025 or 6 or 7, who knows when, to get an update.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Stuart. It's good fun.
No worries at all. We'll try and keep across what's happening in Equinox, and hopefully kind of get a glimpse into the success of it. So all the best.
Yeah, appreciate it. You too.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.